What's going on, people? Happy Sunday morning. It is the Week 5 edition of Fantasy Sports Markets Football Sunday. My name is Ben Heisler. I'm the Director of Media over at Fantasy Sports Markets, and with us each and every Sunday is my good friend. You can hear him on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, as well as reading his outstanding content over at Fantasy Alarm, and one of my favorite follows on the tweet machine, at Fensty Sports, Justin Fensterman, with us for Week 5. What's up, buddy?
Oh, I'm ready, Ben. I am so ready. We got a lot of injuries. Maybe the hardest week of the year when it comes to injured players. But still, this is what we do. We power through. Whether it's that defensive line of injuries or not, we're going to get right to that box and score that touchdown today for everyone.
Remember, there are plenty of ways that you guys can interact with us on the show. We should be live both on Periscope and on YouTube Live. I think it's on my personal Facebook page as well, so don't try and find that. It's very difficult to find, the personal Facebook page. Very, very private. So there's lots of places that you can find us each and every Sunday. We will answer your questions for the next hour leading you up until the injury report comes out at 11:30 a.m. East Coast time. That's 10:30 a.m. Central time. So we will take all those questions for you. Whatever they may be, we'll try our best to get to them right away. And of course, we'll go through the matchups as well. Fancy and I have different plays that we love, whether it be on the DFS side or on the season-long side. We'll get you any breaking news and injury updates over the course of the show. And of course, remember, we are here from Fantasy Sports Markets, which you have not played yet on our DFS page. It is the place to play for fantasy and a different place to be able to get yourself involved in Week 5 in the NFL. Remember, right at the bottom of the screen, there is a promo code for $5 free. Use the promo code FFSunday. That is the code for this show. You can enter in a variety of contests, or you can use it towards another contest. There's $5, $10, $20, single dollar contest. Fancy, I know you got yourself in the winning column last week. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And there's a lot more plays that you can get in on it. There's over $220K up for grabs in Week 5 alone. Don't forget, there's baseball contests and college football contests as well. We already see a question coming in from our buddy PD Dubs over on YouTube, so we will get to you coming up in just a second. But Fensty, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning when we did our preview video. You look like you're completely fetching heading into the start of Cold Nidre services for Tuesday. You look like you're repenting for something, but it's not you that should be repenting. You're very concerned about Marlon Mack for today with the Colts.
I am, because when I see a guy that's in the Sunday night game, an impact player in a game with a high total, because we always love to attack the Chiefs game. That's how it's been. We've always had to have exposure. But here's the problem. It's at 8 o'clock, and he's waiting till warm-ups to see if he can actually go, if the ankle will go. But the problem is, then, that all of our running backs would have played already. And Jordan Wilkins isn't just going to be out there because Mack has been a little dinged up throughout the year. So with that, Ben, this might be one of those things that you have to just bench him, and then if he happens to play and do well, you go, you know what? I took the safety route. It's too risky, Ben.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think, again, if you have some room on your bench and you have some concerns, like if you know that there's a guy, like classic example, I told my brother-in-law to go ahead and drop Josh Allen because I didn't like the matchup for him this week on the road at Tennessee, and he's got a bye week next week. And I said, all right, listen, like if there are guys on your bench that you're just not going to play for the next couple weeks and you have an opportunity to pick up somebody that could be thrust into the starting spot. Earlier in the week, that was somebody like Jalen Samuels with James Conner of the Steelers, basically not really practicing up until the very end of the week. You can take chances on guys like that, knowing that there's going to be a few weeks before you have to worry about them again. I wonder for Marlon Mack owners, if you can go ahead and find Jordan Wilkins sitting on the waiver wire, available as a free agent, maybe that's the move this week, so at least you know you're going to have a bell cow back for this Sunday.
Right, and the only other problem that you have to really think about with this, because again, we're not going to really find out whether or not he's going to be active until warm-ups. We can't even wait until right around the time the 2 4 o'clock games are starting, Ben. This is one of those situations where you have to play it safe, especially with it being bye weeks. If you're in this position where you already have Kerryon Johnson on a bye and you own Marlon Mack, you're going to be in trouble, and you better start that depth that you have hopefully sitting on your bench.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get to some of your guys' questions, and we'll go through the entire slate with you all the way until 11:30 a.m. East Coast time. That's 10:30 a.m. Central time today on Fantasy Football Sunday. Starting with our guy, PD Dubs. He wants to know it's a quarterback toss-up between Dak Prescott at home today against the Green Bay Packers. Coming off a really bad outing, too, for the Dallas Cowboys as well. So does he go Dak against the Green Bay or Jacoby Brissett coming up against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road?
You know, I don't hate Brissett. In fact, I'm starting him because you know me, Ben. I'm a big quarterback streamer.
Yes.
I have at least 2 shares of Brissett, possibly a third. I'll have to check one more of my leagues. And I am fine with that as long as he has T.Y. Hilton. I'm very, very happy with that play. So I don't mind it. However, I think in this type of situation, this game, I have to go back to Dak here. What do you think?
I think Dak is probably the play that I feel a little bit better about. I can see this Green Bay-Dallas game starting to shoot out a little bit and really start to take off. The thing is that Jair Alexander is going to be shadowing Amari Cooper, and that is something that concerns me a little bit. I'm trying to figure out when that's going to start to get going and how bad of a situation that's going to be for Amari. Michael Gallup does return, so I think that takes the edge off the defense a little bit. So I think Prescott actually is a play that I slightly prefer, and I know that the Chiefs' defense has been inconsistent, Fensty, but Jacoby Brissett, Sunday night game in Arrowhead, without their starting running back, he's going to throw a bunch. Again, I say that it's a guarantee as if Marlon Mack isn't playing. That's not necessarily the case. But if he's out, that certainly concerns me enough to the point where I'd probably consider Dak Prescott, and I feel like that's probably the play for me here.
Yes, and I agree with that as well. And don't forget that he will utilize Zeke a little bit more with that, and especially with Gallup being back too, just gives him another target there. So hoping he can find Randall Cobb. And Randall Cobb has had some bad luck this year, Ben. He's had a couple of touchdowns, at least one that's been called back. I mean, looking for him deep, he's had those plays to him, but penalties just have not been on the Cowboys' side in certain instances. So with that, I'm still putting my confidence vote in Dak in this one.
All right, let's go to my buddy Brad over on the Facebook chat. He wants to know whether or not you go with Demarcus Robinson for Kansas City or John Brown on the road going up against Tennessee. So Demarcus Robinson, the first couple of weeks of the season after Tyreek Hill went down, he was the darling of the fantasy community, right? Like we were all going into Demarcus Robinson. We all thought that he was going to get the bulk of the targets. Conversely, John Brown got off to a great start as well for Buffalo and really hasn't seen the volume and opportunity that we'd like. You can burn Tennessee through the air, but you just have to have it on the right spot. With Josh Allen back, Fence, did you trust John Brown a little bit more this week?
I do, with Josh Allen there. And also, by the way, and I'll say this because as always on FSM, we try to teach you as well what other plays with no salary implications, what other plays in the matchups could be advantageous. Someone that I've been on as well is, I do like John Brown in that regard. He's getting the targets. But also, watch out for Dawson Knox as well.
That's right.
Just another target difference maker that you could get when it comes to those tight ends this week. He's made some good catches. Ben, I watched a lot of tape on this rookie coming in. I liked him from the start, got injured in preseason, so that put him behind the ball and the curve just a little bit, but now seems to have a rapport with Josh Allen and makes some hard catches. Expect some more targets going his way. I don't mind Brown. You said it, Ben. They burn him through the air a little bit. You could get that versus Tennessee, and I'm fine with that. With Robinson, yes, still no Tyreek Hill, but with the targets being what they are, it's just they're spread around very much at Kansas City.
And Josh Allen, by the way, there's some reports going on that, at least everything that I've seen is that there's an indication that he's going to play. Have you seen anything otherwise that would dispute that?
No, he got cleared, so I'm expecting him to play in this game.
What's been your take on Buffalo so far? I know that they were 3-0 leading up into that Patriots game, and really after Josh Allen went down, Matt Barkley struggled to get anything going. But I'm still fairly high on him, and I'm high on this team because of how consistent their defense has been in the passing game. I don't mind the fact that they struggle against the run, and that's part of the reason why I think Derrick Henry is a bit of a sneaky play on FantasySportsMarkets.com today. But what's been your take on this Buffalo team?
I'll admit, I'll always admit when I'm wrong, Ben. I was the guy last week on this show that said Frank Gore was old as the hills, facing a very stingy Patriots team. And with that, what did he do? He ran all over them. I was totally wrong about that. Frank Gore shouldn't even be thinking of retiring. This guy could be like Vince Carter, play till he's 100 at this point. He'd be like AC Green back in the day, NBA references. But still,
love AC Green.
He just showed right there, Ben. I mean, New England was one of the best, if not the best, against the run. And Frank Gore runs all over them. So I was dead wrong about that last week.
I've been surprised on them too, and I think they've actually established some balance, and they've hidden a lot of Josh Allen's warts, right? He still has only 3 touchdowns through the air, 6 interceptions, but the reality is that they're running him a lot, and that was part of what made Josh Allen the quarterback one in fantasy. The last 5-6 weeks of the season, people didn't forget that Josh Allen, it wasn't Pat Mahomes, it was Josh Allen that was leading the way as a legit number 1 quarterback because they just said, go ahead and run. That's part of what makes you good.
And I think also time of possession is key and pace of play in the game of football, just like in most sports that go back and forth. It's key. And I think what Buffalo does well is they slow down that pace, and other teams have to adjust to that. So with Buffalo, like you said, the big thing that you said, Ben, in all of this was that their defense just keeps them in games, and that slows down the pace in the opposition. So with that, Ben, you've got to put a little bit of trust into this team.
All right, let's get back to some of our YouTube questions. Remember, you can hit us up on Periscope. You can hit us up on YouTube Live, on Facebook as well. We are with you up until 10:30 a.m. Central Time, 11:30 a.m. East Coast Time. This is coming in from Fever on YouTube. Do you go with Melvin Gordon coming back today or Wayne Gallman? Haven't seen any indication that Saquon Barkley is going to play, which
Nope.
If he did from the high ankle sprain, Fence D, coming up and just missing a week, that's just completely and totally insane. He's a freak of nature. I think the Giants saw an indication that Wayne Gallman can cover them for a couple weeks. He's not Saquon Barkley, but if you're a team like the Giants that are rebuilding, getting Daniel Jones used to the future, trying to build this team up, just from a perspective level, it doesn't really make sense to rush Saquon Barkley back from this type of injury, does it?
No, because Wayne Gallman has been able to do it. It's all about the system as well. So if you can get that protection, then the running back can succeed. That's why these guys are professionals. So they don't have to rush Saquon Barkley back. He's not going to play. Looking at week 6, I try not to read too much into the comments because as reporters are asking the same question over and over to Saquon in 5 different ways just to try to get answers out of him, that he indicated that he was going to be ready, but he's going to be out. So when it comes to Wayne Gallman versus Melvin Gordon, this is something we should talk about for a few minutes, Ben.
Yeah.
Because Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, reports are out from Ian Rappaport, take it as you will, that they are going to split carries Melvin Gordon.
I love your weekly take it as you will, Ian Rappaport.
I have to be honest. This is us being real, okay? I mean, no disrespect to Ian Rappaport. He's got a job for a reason. He's qualified. But when it comes to completion percentage with takes on Twitter, Adam Schefter is the number 1 guy. And so when I see it from Schefter, I know it's going to happen. When I see it from Ian Rappaport, that's not always the case. I don't mean any disrespect. It's the truth. So when it comes to this situation right here, they're splitting carries. That's what Ian Rappaport is saying. I think Austin Eckler gets more carries in this game. I predicted on SiriusXM that both can score a touchdown, Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, but I still think Eckler's been a top 3 back. Why take it all away from him? They don't have to.
No, I don't think so either. In fact, the thing with Austin Eckler is that I've said this from the very beginning, that when Melvin Gordon comes back, he already had a definitive role on this team. So you already knew that Austin Eckler was going to be that satellite back that was still going to get 20 to 30% of the snaps. That was going to be involved in the passing game because he adds a different dimension to this team. And I also talked about it with you at the beginning of the year that when Chargers tight ends are hurt, we've seen the snap count and the volume for Chargers running backs go to upwards of 28%. Austin Eckler's not going anywhere. And in fact, me and my buddy Hayden in one of our leagues made a trade middle of last week. And this is when Melvin Gordon was first reported to be coming back. I traded Chris Carson for Austin Eckler, knowing full well that Melvin Gordon was coming back because I was that confident in a PPR league that Austin Eckler was still going to have volume and opportunity. Now, Chris Carson, he was in a rough spot there too, but he's starting to turn the corner. He's now getting more volume and the opportunity that we expected. So I think this trade could work out for both sides. But that's a situation where I'm confident in the Chargers not going away from a weapon that helps them play better at football.
No, and then the other thing is that you can work out with Melvin Gordon is, in a way, I try to view him because the Chargers overall, and if you look at the last few weeks, they haven't been healthy. We were talking about Dontrell Inman as a punt play. And with that, because their receivers aren't healthy, in a way, Ben, I still view Melvin Gordon as more of a receiver. So I think Austin Eckler will get that hard nose running in. Melvin Gordon will catch passes out of the backfield until this receiving core is 100% healthy, if that could ever be the case again, because we have about 4 or 5 different injuries every week. Mike Williams, by the way, should play. He's been dealing with a back injury. He should be active for this game, but still, again, these guys overall not 100%. So Melvin Gordon could be used in that capacity as well, making room for Eckler to get the bulk of the carries.
We got questions coming in from Jack, from Sam. Our buddy Seth checks in once again on YouTube, as well as Mimsy. So we'll get to all those questions coming up in just a second. A trade question coming in from Ethan on YouTube Live. Fancy, we're talking about Austin Eckler. He wants to know, Austin Eckler for Chris Godwin, would you make that trade? I think if you were talking about at the very beginning of the season, the answer is unequivocally yes.
Yes.
Because you knew that the volume was going to be there. I think with Melvin Gordon coming back, and again, just because I believe in Austin Eckler and I think his role is going to still be used in the Chargers offense, I mean, Chris Godwin right now is a top 3 wide receiver in PPR for fantasy football. I don't think you can make that trade unless you're getting Chris Godwin. I think you can give up Austin Eckler for Chris Godwin. I don't know if I'd go the other way around.
Yes, normally I don't like trading running backs for receivers, but
I don't either.
In this particular situation, because just like Chris Godwin has competition from Mike Evans, and by the way, just you all know out there that if you own a Tampa receiver, whether it's Evans or Godwin, you're going to be on a roller coaster ride because Jameis is going to throw some picks, and you can lock that in, whether it's a block per game, whether it's a few over each week. Jameis is going to make some mistakes. But in this situation with Austin Eckler, Anthony Lynn has said multiple times that once he feels Melvin Gordon is fully ready, he will be the number 1 back. And with that, as much as I think that Austin Eckler has flex appeal, I can't give him up for Chris Godwin at this point.
No, I don't think you can either. What's been your impression, by the way, of what we've seen out of the Tampa Bay Bucks the last few weeks? Week 1 was just brutal. I probably lost every fantasy matchup that I was in because I trusted in the new offense with Jameis Winston, and I think I was just a little bit too early on it. You know, eventually, last couple weeks, we saw what the Bucks were able to do and completely dismantle the Rams in Los Angeles. Tough matchup this week going to New Orleans. We saw what they were able to do to the Dallas Cowboys offense, only limited them to, I believe, 9-10 points last week. You know, there have been some blow-up games for the Bucks inside the Superdome, and normally that was a stadium, Fancy, that we used to target as a high offensive opportunity spot, but no Drew Brees. That changes the perspective, and the Saints defenses look terrific. So when you look at the Bucks, when you look at Jameis and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and whether you want to have any piece of that running game, what's your perspective on Tampa Bay for this week?
Well, I'll tell you this, and this I got to give some credit to Howard Bender from FantasyAlarm.com for this one, Ben, because he talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and it just has stuck in my mind, and that's there are people out there that own both Evans and Godwin. That shouldn't be the case.
I'd be one of those guys.
Trade one, Ben. Trade one. You're going to be dealing with a headache every single week if you don't. And I completely agree with that because of the volatility of Jameis Winston.
See, I don't know if I completely agree with that. And the reason I say that is, you're right. First 2-3 weeks of the season, you're kind of have to playing, you know, which guy are you going to go with? Unfortunately,
but remember, you're going to be playing that game a lot, Ben. A lot more than you think.
Maybe, but I also think if you're looking at how the Bucks offense works, the most consistent option each and every week is going to be Chris Godwin. Like he's the Larry Fitzgerald in the Bruce Arians offense, right? But I also think about volume and target share, and who else is Jameis throwing the football to?
It's a good point.
You know, Brashad Perriman is hurt, and not that he was doing a whole lot anyway. I was worried initially about O.J. Howard taking volume away. That hasn't.
O.J. Howard, who people drafted in probably the 6th round of their drafts.
People took him earlier. People thought that he was going to be on the same level as Zach Ertz and George Kittle this year, Fensty. And like, if you watched O.J. Howard down the stretch of last year, there was reason to have a lot of optimism in him.
This guy has 12 targets all year.
It's not his fault.
I get that. But when Bruce Arians say we're going to get him more balls, I don't know about that.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, Bruce Arians looked me in the eye through the television screen and told me that O.J. Howard was going to get more volume.
Harrison has as many targets as him.
By the way, you want to know how much people were buying into O.J. Howard? So I'm in one Superflex league, and I needed a quarterback, and I hadn't done a lot of Superflex yet, so. I was all of a sudden, it was like the 6th or 7th round. Normally, you don't have to worry about a quarterback until like the 8th or the 9th. And like everybody was off the board, and you can do in-round trades. So I ended up getting somebody by the name of Lamar Jackson for O.J. Howard. And sure enough, that ended up working out well. I didn't think at the time that O.J. Howard would be this bad of a bust, and coincidentally, I'm sure he didn't think Lamar Jackson would be the number one quarterback scoring in fantasy football this year.
No, and you know what, Ben? You did a good job there. You capitalized, and you capitalized early, and that's where for trade strategies, this is vulnerability time. You have to take advantage. One guy, Ben, that I spoke about yesterday on Wake Up Fantasy Sports, which you can hear every single Saturday on Sirius XM, 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern. One of the players I spoke about is how to value DeAndre Hopkins in trades right now, because you're going to have people that are so desperate that they're going to give him, not just give him away, but they're going to undervalue him at this point. But that's where you got to look ahead. You got to look at his schedule coming up. He's got a very good October schedule. It's more than just the week. We are preparing for those final few weeks so that you could go into the playoffs armored and everything.
All right, we see questions coming in from Sean, from Fever, from Mimsy, Seth, another one coming in from PD Dubs, Sam as well. But let's get to Jack's question. Nice little Shana Tova from our buddy Jack. We appreciate that.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, 2 questions. Is it time to drop Delaney Walker and pick up Jimmy Graham or Tyler Eifert off of waivers? Also, James White or Hollywood Brown this week. So let's start with the Delaney Walker question. It's between him, Jimmy Graham, or Tyler Eifert. And the reality is that from a matchup perspective, Delaney Walker, it's not in his favor this week. No. When it comes to Tyler Eifert, I think a lot of people are going to have him in their cash lineups on the salary sites this week because they're just following the flow chart of what happens with tight ends going up against Arizona. They are abysmal. They're the worst in the NFL at stopping the tight end position. So I completely understand the need for Tyler Eifert. However, no Devontae Adams for Green Bay today, going up against a Dallas secondary that you can exploit in the middle of the field. My buddy Derek Brown says he's going to have 100% ownership of Jimmy Graham this week. And so when I hear somebody like that say that he's going completely all in on Jimmy Graham, that's reason for me to stop, look, and listen. And really, I realize that reference got by and nobody caught it. That's fine. It's hard not to like Jimmy Graham, especially with no Devontae Adams to take away those red zone targets. He's been targeted 4 times in the red zone this year by Green Bay.
Yep, I saw a report earlier, Ben, that they're going to feed Jimmy Graham a little bit more because of the Adams injury as well from people who cover the team. So that's a good spot for Jimmy Graham. That whole reputation of Aaron Rodgers not going to hit his tight end, that's over. We've seen Jimmy Graham produce. He won me money in Showdown last Thursday. So with Jimmy Graham, and again, this just shows right here, we shouldn't have to compare the tight ends. You can stream tight ends. This question proves it. You've got Tyler Eifert, who's got the Arizona matchup, and you've got Jimmy Graham, both guys that have some of the best matchups of the day of any tight end.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm fine with dropping Delaney Walker.
Would you drop him for Eifert or for Jimmy?
I would drop him for Jimmy.
I would too.
A little bit more long-term because, again, I don't fully trust Cincinnati. This week you should. But then after that, I go back to not trusting them for the most part.
So here's the stat from our buddy Derek Brown, and you can catch me and Derek in the Quan Edge video series presented by Fantasy Sports Markets, as well as in our weekly podcast where we do the slate breakdown. He says Aaron Rodgers is second in the NFL in red zone passing attempts with 25. Rodgers has been tossing it when the Packers get in close, also tied for 5th in passing attempts inside the 10-yard line. With Devontae Adams out this week, the primary beneficiary is Jimmy Graham, who is second to Adams on the team in red zone targets with 4 targets inside the 10-yard line. With Adams off the field in the last 2 seasons, Jimmy Graham's red zone target share has risen from 10.9 to 14.3% to almost 40%. And that's against a Dallas defense that plays zone. They're 21st in DVOA against tight ends. So Jimmy Graham, a terrific value this week when it comes to the tight end spot. So hopefully that answers your first question, Jack. Second one, James White or Hollywood Brown this week. So I saw a great stat from about James White that I have to see if I can find from Graham Barfield over at NFL.com. I liked him beginning of this week. I love him now, especially with Rex Burkhead not playing. The stat is James White has averaged 21.1 PPR points and 9.3 targets per game when Rex Burkhead is out over the past 2 seasons, compared to just 13.3 points per game and 6.4 targets per game. So his PPR points density goes up nearly 7. His targets per game nearly go up 3 full targets. So James White, I think you can absolutely start with confidence this week. Maybe Hollywood Brown catches a long touchdown. He's missed a couple, but I love James White today.
Right, and you just said it there, Ben. It's like you need Hollywood Brown to catch a deep ball, and that's going to be a little bit tougher against Pittsburgh. So with that, I'm going to go James White as well. And also something I know that going into the season and even in the first few weeks that you can't really trust the Patriots backfield. But let me just tell you this, Ben. With Sony Michel, he doesn't do anything. He literally just runs up the middle
He's been
for
awful.
2 yards every time. He's the most boring running back. James White can do a little bit more. And again, with getting those targets as well, I like James White better.
I know that Sony Michel for the first time finally surpassed the 4 yards per carry mark last week. But like if that's your benchmark right now for Sony Michel, it's just a completely disastrous situation. Everything about him right now just screams something is wrong.
He's
might
slow.
be hurt.
He's just slow. And I don't know if it's that the Patriots are not telling him to cut left or right, but it's up the middle, I feel like, every single time. And I get it's boring, but it's almost like, okay, bring this guy in for goal line work then, if that's how he's going to be.
He saved face in that win against Miami, the 43-0 win where he got into the end zone. Same thing in that abysmal performance against the Jets. He had 9 rushing attempts for 11 yards and a touchdown. Was targeted 1 time. Sony Michel does not have 1 reception this year. Not 1. So. Nope. There's plenty of better options. Like I'm in a league where I've been snake bit at the running back spot. I think I had the turn in the draft, so I took Devontae Adams and Odell Beckham, and then went with I think Damian Williams and Sony Michel at either the 3 and the 5 spot. And so that's a league that I'm just trying to figure out what to do. So I'm starting him this week in that league, but in daily, I want nothing to do with Sony Michel, especially in PPR spots.
He's the only guy that can score a touchdown, and you're still so underwhelmed by his performance.
Exactly, yeah. Just not a fan right now of what we're seeing out of Sony Michel. James White, to me, by far, is the play when it comes to the Patriots. Let's continue on our YouTube Live questions from, there's another one coming in from, PD Dubs, we'll get to you just in a second, because you already had one already. From Sam, we talked about James White. So is it James White, Cortland Sutton, or Calvin Ridley in a half-point PPR? So James White, I think initially, Fency, my first glance on this question is that he, by far and away, is the safest of all those options. Cortland Sutton is going up and likely paired up with Casey Hayward, who is a bit banged up, but he's going on the road. And he's had some nice games so far this year, but I don't know if I necessarily trust him in this matchup. Calvin Ridley, I think, is the wild card here, because the last few weeks have not been the Calvin Ridley that we're used to seeing. First couple weeks of the season, he was terrific. Got into the end zone multiple times. I think he saw upwards of 10 targets in either week 1 or week 2 as I try and load up his snap count and his target volume. But week 3, week 4, abysmal numbers from Calvin Ridley, to the point where we were just trying to figure out what's happening here. He wasn't targeted until the second half in that loss against the Colts. He had 1 target, 1 catch for 6 yards. Last week in the loss against Tennessee, targeted 6 times, 3 catches, 32 yards, did not get into the end zone. I really like him today, Fensty, as a contrarian play in DFS, but I think when it comes to this matchup in season long, I much prefer James White.
Keep James White for all the reasons we just said, but I'm just telling you right there, when it comes to daily and shootout potential, this is the game you want in.
100%. Yes.
Especially, I'll tell you this right now, and most likely on FSM, I will be doing this. I will be stacking Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins from that side. I will also have Calvin Ridley in a couple of those lineups as well. So again, thinking that this has tremendous shootout potential, 50 is the game total there. We're going to be flirting with the over here, Ben.
Okay, you brought up that game. I want to talk to you about that because I've seen multiple stats on Julio Jones that are really intriguing. One of them is from our guy Derek Brown's 10 stats article over at the Quant Edge, involving games where the total is over 49 for Julio, where he just goes off. And then another one from Graham Barfield that says since 2016, Julio Jones is averaging 6.8 receptions and 111.2 yards when the Falcons are underdogs. Texans are a 5-point favorite in the game today. Would you rather have a stack of Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins or Matt Ryan and Julio Jones? The good news is that you can play all 4 of those guys in Superflex on fantasy sports markets today.
No, I'm fine with that. And I'm totally fine with that. I'll tell you this, though, and this is something that John and Pemba from FantasyAlarm.com discussed with me as well. First of all, if I'm picking between the 2 stacks, I'm going with the Hopkins, Deshaun Watson.
Okay.
I think this is a big show-me game for them. They need this game. And again, I'm putting a lot of trust into Watson Hopkins. So it's very, very close, and that's great that on FSM we could use all 4. But if you want to go with a game stack, maybe someone else to look at in this game, because again, at Fantasy Alarm, very confident in this Falcons offense, Mohamed Sanu.
Okay.
Him as well. if you're looking for a few targets, touchdown there. So there are a lot of people in play there. So this is a game that you were going to want against that.
So Sanu is really interesting, and from a perspective of him trying to get himself going, didn't really do anything the first couple of weeks. When Calvin Ridley was dealing with the injury and not doing much the last couple of weeks, it was Sanu that stepped up. So the question then becomes, is Ryan going to continue to look Sanu's way and not towards Ridley? Or now that Ridley is back towards being healthy, is he going to go back and look his way? Conversely, with this matchup, this might be Will Fuller week. And I know that he's been, initially he started as an intriguing tournament play. I think Will Fuller might end up being a cash game option on the salary sites the way that he's been hyped up this week, and because where ownership is likely to be expected for him. I think both Hopkins and Fuller are in play in cash. But, everybody talks about the missed touchdown from Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller last week. He's 6th in the NFL right now, fenced in air yards. At some point, him and Watson are going to connect. And it's weird looking at these stat lines from Will Fuller, and they don't look anything like the Will Fuller that we've seen before in the past.
Right.
He's averaging 10 yards per reception so far this year. It's just, everything about it is screaming something's missing. 3 for 23 last week against Carolina, 5 for 51, 4 for 40 against Jacksonville. The only game that actually kind of looked like himself was the game against New Orleans, where he was averaging 34.5 yards per reception, but he only had 2 receptions in that game. I think if there's going to be an opportunity for Will Fuller to break out, it is this game. I don't care whether it's chalk or not.
Do you think that Watson is calling too many plays downfield for Fuller and is not keeping him short in crossing routes? That's my question right there, because that's the Will Fuller I thought we were getting coming into this season, and it has been the case. He's looked for him deep, and again, we talked about guys like Hollywood Brown. In order for them to essentially make their value and pull their weight, they need to catch a deep ball. And that's what Will Fuller's been as well this year, Ben. I think that's the difference between this year and last year with this guy.
Perfectly reasonable take, yeah.
Kenny Still's likely out in this game as well, so it brings a little bit more comfort when it comes to target share.
Right, which also means that if anyone's desperate for a wide receiver during the bye weeks, you can go ahead and pick up somebody like Kiki Kute in the slot to try and get himself going. Not necessarily the best matchup for guys on this team, but I do think he's certainly in play. If you need somebody just for the short term, maybe a dart throw if you're playing on some of the other salary sets. I got
a dart throw for you, Ben Heisler, here. This is something I heard Chris Raybon say from the Action Network.
Yeah.
Jordan Akins, again, on salaried sites, he's very, very cheap. He's been getting targeted a little bit more, 9 targets in the last few weeks, receptions. Again, he's starting to get some targets. And if you're looking for the ultimate contrarian tight end, because everybody is going to be on Tyler Wright for today, secret's out. Arizona is the worst team, and they continue being the worst team. You have to try to find a difference maker. And if you're game stacking and need the cheapie, Jordan Akins could be that guy.
I don't hate that play one bit. Facebook question coming in from our buddy Joe. Toss it between T.Y. Hilton or Shady McCoy. At least we know Shady's going to play. I'd be surprised if T.Y. Hilton doesn't, but you're not giving him the Marlon Mack treatment. You're not putting him on the bench. I feel confident in T.Y. Hilton playing, and he's lit up the Chiefs before in the past. So I would go T.Y. Hilton here.
I would not be comfortable streaming Jacoby Brissett, even in this matchup, if T.Y. Hilton wasn't playing. He's practiced. He's going to play from everything we've seen. And if he doesn't, I will be crying, and I might have to tape myself crying. But with T.Y. Hilton, that's going to be my guy there.
This is from our buddy Dan. I'm a bit confused by the question. He says, anyone's defense versus Miami and the New York Jets. I assume that's just like a streaming question over the course of the rest of the year. Yes, when it comes to Miami, but the Jets are going to get Sam Darnold back. And when Sam Darnold comes back, their offense is going to look much more competent, I would imagine. But Le'Veon Bell's going to have some more volume, yeah.
Ben, did you ever know anyone with mono? We both went to college. You went to IU. I'm sure some people had mono there, Ben.
There's a funny story I'll tell you off the air involving mono,
I'll tell you a funny story on the air. My roommate in college had mono. He was down for 7 weeks. Literally did not leave our room for 7 weeks. And this guy's not a professional athlete. He's actually a college swimmer, which is very funny with this whole thing. 7 weeks. With the spleen being, such a risk for Sam Darnold at this point, there are no guarantees with this, Ben. It's mono.
That's true. It is mono. But I will say this. Once he comes back, Fensty, I'm not necessarily buying into the Jets offense, but I think they're competent. Like, Darnold's going to take some steps in the right direction. There's still talent around him in Robbie Anderson and Le'Veon Bell and Jamison Crowder. Chris Herndon is going to add a dimension too.
Demaryius Thomas could be coming back as well, Ben. So that just adds another option too.
So I think when it comes to your question, yes, and Dan clarifies, should we pick a defense versus the Jets or Miami this week and in the future because their offenses are so abject? The answer is yes, but I don't think that necessarily applies to the Jets once Darnold comes back. I think right now that's perfectly fine. Like, Philadelphia has been terrible against the pass this year. It doesn't matter because Luke Falk is starting, and you can go ahead and stream the Eagles' defense and feel great about it.
Right, and Jets have had a lot of guys out. They signed Mosley. He's been out. Quinnen Williams is hurt. They drafted. I mean, it's one of those things, Ben, where they're just so banged up right now. You can't put any faith in this team. And by the way, you should always be looking to stream defenses. That's such an easy game to play with all the resources that you have. I have never prioritized the defense once in my fantasy football career, Ben. I stream every week. And yes, I know it's so hard having to go to the waiver wire and pick up a defense and drop another. It's tedious. But that is how you win when you have defense as a position. I have said it for years. Get rid of team defense. Get rid of kickers. Add more to the offensive part of fantasy football. But for some of the traditionalists that still play with team defense, stream.
That's perfectly reasonable. Let's keep it going on YouTube from Seth. He's got two flex questions, both half-point PPR. The first, between Curtis Samuel, Cortland Sutton, or Miles. This is Miles Samuels. I assume he means Miles Sanders. So if between Curtis Samuel, Cortland Sutton, or Miles Sanders, I'm probably ruling out Sanders here. It's weird to see Jordan Howard likely turning into the lead back. Now,
he's too involved, Ben. He's too involved.
Now, I will say this. I still think at the end of the year, Miles Sanders will be the guy.
Yes.
So if I were you, Seth, I would try and use this as an opportunity to buy low on Miles Sanders. Or I can sound like you already have him. So anybody that's watching this that does not have Miles Sanders, maybe they have Jordan Howard. I would try to move Jordan Howard while his volume is still pretty good. He's a sell high candidate for me, and meanwhile Miles Sanders is a buy low candidate. So with that being said, I'm probably not playing him this week, even in a good matchup against the Jets. I do like Curtis Samuel quite a bit. And part of the reason why is that the replacement for Jalen Ramsey has gotten cooked all year long. Curtis Samuel has nearly twice as many air yards as he does receptions and receiving yards, and I feel like this is a great spot for him to go deep and connect with Kyle Allen this week.
Right, and for those that are really just starting out in the daily world or even in fantasy in general, don't focus as much on the receptions. Focus on the targets. And when I see a player, and Ben, 7 targets is my line, essentially. When I see a guy, and even with Hopkins, who is getting no fewer than 7 targets this season per game. When I see Curtis Samuel over the last 3 weeks have gotten 7, 7, 13, at least he's getting targeted. The offense and the confidence is still there with him. Like you said, with no Ramsey, that helps out on the other side. So with Curtis Samuel today, and especially good value on salaried sites as well, I'm going to go Samuel here.
All right, the other question that he has is between half-point PPR, DJ Moore, Emmanuel Sanders, or Miles Sanders, just gives me Sanders, or Will Fuller, but he says he already has DeAndre Hopkins in his lineup already. So, again, DJ Moore, they don't have to worry about Jalen Ramsey. Not like Ramsey would likely be covering him in the slot anyway. Again, I assume that it's Miles Sanders or Emmanuel. I don't really know. I'm buying in on the Will Fuller train. So, to me, that train has left the station. I'm all in on Will Fuller this week. That would be my guy, Seth, and that's the play for me.
Yep. And again, with the game being so high, you want investment in this game. So much more comfortable there with Fuller.
Mimsy's check. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, though, here's the thing with Fuller. This is one of those weeks where he can't take advantage in this matchup, Ben. This guy's going to be, I don't want to say on the chopping block for me, but this guy's going to be in timeout. And it's not necessarily his fault. They need to play shorter with him. That's what he does well. You can't only look for this guy downfield. You can't give him the Kenny Stills treatment.
No, I completely agree with that. I think it's an advantageous matchup. Again, that's a number, like I already have bet the over in that game when it was at 49. Like, it's going to move up, and you know Matt Ryan is going to chuck it around too. So conversely, Watson is going to be able to get involved. The Atlanta pass rush, other than that Week 2 game against Philadelphia, really hasn't shown up this year. Both teams have a lot to try and prove in this game, and I feel like it's going to have to be up to the offenses to have to stick it out. I also think that it might get off to a slow start, And then the second half, that's usually what's happened the last couple of weeks with Atlanta as well. So don't get too discouraged if the Falcons are a little bit slow in getting themselves going. You'll see it happen in the second half.
Ben, Fensty Sports has a question for you.
Yes, Fensty Sports. Please, yes, go ahead.
Ben, on FSM, especially with this great matchup the Chargers have here, with Denver being just so poor against the run, would you suggest stacking both Chargers wide receivers, or rather, both Chargers running backs, Gordon and Eckler? Would that move for FSM, or is that something that you're staying away from?
I have a feeling like there's no statistical evidence that would suggest that Denver stays in this game, but they've always played the Chargers tough. And I feel like last year they stole one on the road against them last year. In fact, I think Phillip Lindsay is a bit of an intriguing start. Probably not somebody that I love for FSM. But I don't think I'm ready to go there with Melvin Gordon yet. I kind of need to see what that workload is going to be like. I still feel confident in Austin Eckler. I think you can throw him in an FSM lineup at pretty low ownership because no one's going to be on him yet. I don't know if I'm there yet, Fensty, but I think that would be a hell of a contrarian play.
Right. Now, I had to ask because, again, this is the types of situations where if you play on FSM, you can absolutely do no salary, no problem.
Right, but the problem here with playing Melvin and Eckler, yes, you'd have opportunity to leverage the field. But if there's no salary cap to worry about and you have Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara and Zeke Elliott, Dalvin Cook and David Johnson and Lenny Fournette, Nick Chubb if you're playing the Thursday through Monday slate, Joe Mixon is in a great spot, finally. You can try and sell high on him after this week. Austin Eckler. David Montgomery is going to get some volume in London today against the Raiders. James White. Like, there's all these great running backs that I probably prefer over Melvin Gordon at this point.
Right.
So I just don't feel like this is the week to do it.
Okay.
From Mimsy on YouTube Live, we were talking about the Raiders. Josh Jacobs against the Chicago Bears today, or Jalen Samuels in full point PPR. This is tough because here's the thing. To me, the easy answer would be Josh Jacobs, and that would be because John Gruden has said 2 weeks ago, we're going to get Josh Jacobs the ball in passing opportunities. Man, if you're going to do it, you're not going to run on the Bears. Bears defense has just been absolutely electric. They stuffed out a very good, probably the best run offense in the NFL last week in Dalvin Cook. So he's been good, Josh Jacobs has been, but they're not getting him the ball in pass-catching spots. And so I would feel much better about Josh Jacobs if they were using him in the passing game. Conversely, last week, Jalen Samuels had rushing volume, had several opportunities in the passing game, ran for a touchdown. Do you play a backup running back over somebody like Josh Jacobs today?
It's so hard, and I wish I knew whether or not Juju was going to play, because then that supports your theory, Ben.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the Raiders, they're going to be out of an option again with Tyrell Williams. We're going to see if he's going to play. Like reports are that he's going to likely be out, but Jacobs just hasn't been getting the reception. He's been getting targeted twice. That's it in the last few games.
And that's Fensty. If you watch him in Alabama, that was what he was so good at. Like, that was part of the reason why it made so much sense, I suppose, if you're going to take a first-round pick on Josh Jacobs, is that the NFL and the running game is changing, and he's dynamic enough in the passing game, and they just haven't used him the way that makes him most effective. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. In Baltimore, you can run on them as well, so he will be active in that regard. I don't mind it, Ben. I don't mind it. The safer play to me is still Jacobs.
I agree.
But at the end of the day, you want to take a throw on Samuels as well, especially with banged-up receivers when it comes to Pittsburgh.
And James Conner's banged up too. Yes, he practiced on Friday, but all it takes is one tweak. James Conner's out the rest of the game, and Jalen Samuels is a top 15 play.
Right.
Let's keep going on the YouTube live stream. We just answered Mimsy's question. Let's go to Fever. So now that Melvin Gordon is in my running back spot, should I start Gallman or Watkins for the flex? To me, this is a no-brainer. Great matchup. Colts. This surprised me, Fensty, because I look at the Colts as kind of a mediocre to decently good team this year. Did you know that they're second worst in DVOA this year when it comes to their defense? That really surprised me.
Right. No, so, you know what? But Ben, how much do you really want to go against Gallman at this point?
I do if it's Sammy Watkins.
Okay.
Against the Colts in the middle of the field at home for Mahomes, yeah, I absolutely would rather go Sammy Watkins here. I like what Wayne Gallman was providing, Fensty, but he's going up at home against Minnesota.
Right.
Vikings defense isn't a slouch, and I know that they've been much better at home than on the road, but I don't take the Giants seriously yet. Like, they've had matchups that really set up well for Daniel Jones. This is not one of those matchups. I look at this game for Minnesota as a get-right spot for Kirk Cousins. I think Adam Thielen's going to see a lot more targets. I'm not sure about Stephon Diggs. And initially at the beginning of the week, I thought this is a squeaky wheel game for him, but they just fined him $200,000. Like, he's clearly pissed off at the team. And there's just a lot of resentment there. And so I wonder whether or not Mike Zimmer is in Kirk Cousins' ear saying, like, hey, get Thielen the ball. He's been a good soldier through all this. He's been a good teammate, and not necessarily force it to Stephon Diggs.
And
I don't
Diggs
think that's
Diggs is also, by the way, coming off his best game of the year,
Yes,
over
he is.
100 yards, 7 receptions on 7 targets, Ben. This whole thing just doesn't make sense. I mean, I know it's about when these players winning games, but at the same time, when this guy's coming off his best game of the year, why now? There's something that we're not getting in this entire story. And now there was question whether or not he will be active today, and reports are saying that he should be active.
He should be.
Still never know.
Right. And so I do think, like, if you wanted to take a really contrarian stack this week and do Cousins with Thielen or Cousins with Thielen and Diggs, I won't fault you for it because the Giants haven't shown any indication that they're stopping the pass. So,
Right.
You can even run it back with Dalvin Cook if you feel like, the narrative of the Vikings trying to get the passing game offense. Dalvin Cook is probably going to have lower ownership than initially anticipated this week just because of that. So, I'm buying into what Minnesota should be able to do this week. Now, if Kirk Cousins sucks this week against the Giants on the road, they are in serious trouble.
Yes. You like that? Nope.
Nope, not one bit. So for Fever, to answer your question, I think are we both going with Watkins here? Or are you still going with Wayne Gallman?
Man, I still want to give Wayne Gallman a shot.
Okay,
I still
perfectly
do.
reasonable.
I still do. And by the way, I know that Golden Tate is back. That's interesting as well to me.
Is it
future.
though?
Not this week, but in the future, it is. This guy got screwed last year. Let me just tell you. I also think the suspension was unwarranted if everything that we've seen.
I completely agree with.
But last year, he had a double bye week because he got traded. That's unfair. He was doing great in Detroit. Gets traded, and all of a sudden he's in a major target share and had an extra bye week as well. That's not his fault, Ben.
It's not his fault, but I also don't look at Golden Tate in this offense as any sort of savior. Like, Golden Tate is just sort of another example of, he's kind of does what Sterling Shepard does, and he kind of does what Evan Ingram does. Like,
This is a very good spectator type of week for Golden Tate. I just want to see how he's going to be integrated in this offense. You see the connection with Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard. I wish there was a little bit more production out of Ingram from his previous matchup, but, that happens sometimes. But at the end of the day, coming out of the slot, seeing if Golden Tate can get some targets, at least in this game, so I can start him maybe as a punt play in the future.
That's true. I will say this, though, by the way. You can target Minnesota in the middle of the field. If I have Evan Ingram on my season-long team, I'm not worried about benching him this week just because of how Minnesota's defense has been.
No, you paid for him.
Absolutely. But then again, you also paid for O.J. Howard, too, and that's we've seen how that's gone. From Sean on YouTube Live. PPR League, I need to start 2 of the 3 guys, so 1 has to go. Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, or Nick Chubb. Fensty, do we dare tell somebody not to play Nick Chubb again this week? I can't do it, even though San Francisco's defense has improved, so I think Chubb has to be in there. I know he doesn't catch a lot of passes. If it's PPR,
It might have to be Eckler. It might have
to bench him? Or
to bench him, yes.
Because you can run on Buffalo. I think Eckler has to sit, which is crazy.
Matchup. I mean, that's the thing. I think it has to be Eckler, unfortunately, because of this carry split.
You know what? I think that's the play. It's crazy to think about because of how good he's been, but Chubb is getting 95% of the snaps. Almost like
you can't bet. You're not benching Chubb in this match.
No, you can't bench Chubb. He's had back-to-back weeks, 23 attempts, 20 rushing attempts. Didn't see as many targets in the passing game, has had no more than 4 targets so far this year. Derrick Henry doesn't get targeted much in the passing game either. as I'm looking up his volume right now. Still 27 rushing attempts for 100 yards, had 1 target last week. He's had no more than 3 targets in a game, Fensty, but I think you're looking at Derrick Henry for just pure volume and goal line work.
Less competition.
Right. I can't believe I'm telling somebody to bench Austin Eckler.
It's tough, Ben, but this is a good situation to be in.
Oh, it's a great situation to be in. So hopefully, Sean, that answers your question. All 3 of those guys could just completely break this. Not only they'll break the slate today, but I think they could all have major games. Another toss-up from Mimsy on YouTube Live, Fensty. Julian Edelman or Calvin Ridley in full point PPR. Edelman looking like he's going to give it a go today.
He's going to play. So with that, as much as, I want to go with Calvin Ridley from the daily side, from the season-long side, I'm going to go back, put some more confidence into the Patriots here. I mean, look at the matchup. I laugh every time I see the Redskins. Let me be honest with you. But with that, I'm going to go with Edelman here over Ridley.
By the way, who would have thought that Dan Snyder actually got one thing right? The reports are that, Jay Gruden didn't want Dwayne Haskins, but Dan Snyder did. So, of course, Dan Snyder got his way. Why wouldn't Dwayne Haskins is going to be really good? It just, if they need a decent coaching staff around him, they need a front office that has some sort of stability. Like, going to Washington usually just destroys your career, and so I worry about him. But why? What's not to like about Dwayne Haskins?
It's interesting. He needs more reps. That's the thing. I mean, you expect him to be a star right away.
Colt McCoy is starting today again.
Right.
Why? Is it? Right. Are they trying to protect him?
Yeah, no, they probably are, Ben. They want to bring him on slowly, and that's an investment. In football being full contact, they do. They don't want him just standing around and then getting pummeled by a linebacker coming in. So with that, if they're going to lose every game and not have what they need to protect this guy, then why put him out there? I mean, the Redskins are so pathetic. I mean, come on, there's a new smoking Jay in sports now.
That's true.
That's terrible, by the way. I don't get it.
No, but it's funny, though. It still works.
Welcome to DC.
Chris on YouTube Live has a tight end question for us in PPR. First tight end toss-up of the day, Fensty, between Austin Hooper or Mark Andrews. And both those guys have been great all season long. Hooper really, I think, has defied a lot of expectations. Maybe you can make the argument that Andrews has as well. It's hard to go away from Austin Hooper the way that he's gotten volume in this offense. Pittsburgh's defense certainly far better than Houston. And Austin Hooper, I think, led the Falcons in targets last week. Do you dare go away from him this week? In this situation, Ben, I would. I'm going Andrews here. Again, still getting targeted a lot. I know with Lamar Jackson, we're starting to see him come back to earth. I get that. But overall, Ben, and this, when looking at both of them, Hooper's got the tougher matchup. I'm going Andrews here. Okay. I think I'm slightly leaning towards Hooper because I just want exposure to that game because I feel like Ryan's going to have to sling it all over the place to compete with Houston. But Mark Andrews has been so efficient. I just know that Hooper's going to run more routes, but when Andrews is on the field, you pretty much know that they're going to be passing. Like Mark Andrews last week had 8 targets in the passing game, only ran 29 out of 69 snaps. It's like they know that he's going to be on the field, and he's also getting great red zone work, but then again, Hooper is as well. Alex, we were talking about Golden Tate just a minute ago. He wants to know, does Golden Tate's returning hurt or help Sterling Shepard's fantasy value? I think it depends on where they're going to have Sterling Shepard line up.
Right.
If Golden Tate takes a spot in the slot, then I think it hurts it. Conversely, if they're going to just move guys around, I think it could help because it's going to open up some better matchups for Sterling Shepard. So I think right now I'm leaning towards it hurts it.
Yes. I mean, the target volume is going to go down a little bit naturally. So that's why they got this guy out of the slot. And we've seen what Daniel Jones can do as well. Quick passes to Golden Tate's going to be key down the stretch for this Giants offense. So, yes, it will hurt Sterling Shepard a little bit. But because there are not too many weapons in this offense, there are still enough targets to go around that he'll hold value for flex appeal.
From Alex, that was Alex's question. PPR toss-up, we talked about Wayne Gallman a little bit. I know that I prefer Watkins to him, but in PPR, do you like Wayne Gallman over David Montgomery?
Oof. Man, Montgomery, hard man to trust, Ben. They're
great matchup this week against the Raiders.
You know what? We're going to go David Montgomery. It's time for him to break out. It's going to be very, very close. And again, we've only seen Gallman, since Saquon's gone out against that Redskins team. So with that, again, I'm going to have to go with David Montgomery there, seeing a little bit more, and hopefully Matt Nagy continues to start to feed him a little bit more.
I'm with you there. We got about 5 minutes left. I see questions from Adam, from Ruben, from Chris as well. So we'll get to all of you guys. Like we said, we answer every single question here on Fantasy Football Sunday, presented by Fantasy Sports Markets. This one coming in from Paul, half-point PPR, Geronimo Allison or McCole Hardman this week.
Wow.
Hardman's got a great matchup against the Colts. He's always a deep threat for Mahomes, and Mahomes loves playing under the lights. But Geronimo Allison seen touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. No Devontae Adams, so I think his targets are going to be more volume. What's the word I'm looking for? Full of volume. There's a word for it. But I think Geronimo Allison's certainly the safer play of the two.
Right, and especially again with Adams out and getting targeted a lot. Green Bay, I want a piece of Green Bay today. So I'm fine with going Allison. I actually am going to have this situation at least in 2 leagues.
Oh, really? With Geronimo Allison and
versus Hardman, because I have a decent amount of shares of both of them. So I will be getting both involved overall, but between the two, I'm going to go Allison here.
From Adam, he wants to know if we have trust in T.Y. Hilton tonight. It's a great matchup, but the injury worries me. I have Sterling Shepard as a second option. We both believe T.Y. Hilton's going to play. He's crushed the Chiefs before in the past. I would go T.Y. Hilton tonight. I'm not as worried about him as I am with Marlon Mack.
No. So with that, and that can only benefit him more if Marlon Mack does not play. So T.Y. Hilton's out there. And again, one of the biggest lessons for today with Jacoby Brissett being a stream option, I would not put him out there if T.Y. Hilton was going to be out. The fact that T.Y. Hilton is in, being such a fantasy asset that he's going to get a lot of targets in this game.
From Ruben on YouTube Live, kind of something that we talked on before. Does he believe that Will Fuller will have his breakout game, or should he go with Sterling Shepard? A lot of Sterling Shepard questions today, Fetsty.
Yes, because you know what? This is for Sterling Shepard. This is audition time to see if he can keep his spot. So there's a lot of motivation behind that for Sterling Shepard today with Golden Tate coming back.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm with you on the Will Fuller train too. A couple more toss-ups. This one's coming in for, this is from Chris. Toss-up between Damian Williams or David Montgomery. Also, shout out Natalie on this video as well. So who do you go with, Chris? For Chris, with Damian Williams and David Montgomery?
I mean, Damian Williams, are we for certain that he's going to play?
I think he is.
And I'm looking at my notes right now.
He's back at practice. I know he was questionable. But I'm going
play according to reports.
Yes, but see, that's the thing is I love Damian Williams at the beginning of the year. I like how they used him in the passing game. He saw, I think, 5-6 targets in the first 2 games of the season. Probably should have had a bigger game against the Raiders, but he ended up getting hurt. So I'm going Montgomery in this matchup because I know Montgomery is 100%.
Right.
And there you go. Those are our questions. We still got a few more minutes left. But
I got a question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
Now with Damian Williams, he does play. LaShawn McCoy's value, what do you expect it to be? Do you think that for this, especially being in bye weeks, in this matchup, he still has some standalone value here?
I think he does because they don't seem to be concerned about him in the red zone. The thing about the Chiefs is that they used Darrell Williams more in the second half the last couple weeks, which was a bit of a concern. But McCoy is still playing around 40 to 45% of the snaps, still getting usually around 10 touches in the running game, still seeing 3-4 targets in the passing game. So he's reliable. He's just not going to be anything special for you at this point. Damian Williams, I thought had a chance to be special because of how they were going to use him in the passing game because of the Chiefs' efficiency in that spot. Darrell Williams right now has been really good the last couple weeks, but if Damian Williams is back, I just don't know what his role is going to be. Andy Reid at the beginning of the season, he talked about it being a committee and seemed perfectly content with it. And I wonder if that's going to look like the case the rest of the way.
No, I'm with you there. And I honestly, the reason they got McCoy, I think he loves McCoy. That's the thing. He loves him as a back, loves having him there. Going to get goal line work, if anything, at minimum.
All right, so Fensy, before we wrap things up, let's go through some of our favorite plays if we were building a cash game lineup over on FantasySportsMarkets.com. Again, there is $5 free just for looking at the screen, you guys. $5 by using promo code FFSunday. Contest will begin coming up at 1 p.m. East Coast time 12 p.m. Central Time. Promo code FFSunday will get you $5 free in any of the contests over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. You can use them for baseball, you can use them for college football, but certainly with all the talk that we've had for NFL, that's usually the way to go. At the quarterback spot, Pat Mahomes is always in play. The Sunday night games are included on the main slate for fantasy sports markets. He'll be the chalk game quarterback once again. But then after that, I think it'll be him, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. People love playing him. And then after that, it can kind of get a little bit interesting. I know that I'm going to want to have exposure to Matt Ryan today. What about you?
Some of the other guys that you can look at as well, because, Ben, you just mentioned a few of my guys, especially with Watson. What about Wentz and Brady?
Yep.
Both in great spots today. Tom Brady looking for the bounce back against a pathetic team. And guess what? Carson Wentz also in a situation where he's playing. And you know what? Just that game last week against Green Bay just showed me again why the Eagles' offense and passing game, again, starting Alshon Jeffrey, coming off the injury, him producing. Carson Wentz has some serious value today.
Absolutely. I like the Carson Wentz call quite a bit. Also, a lot of people think that Dallas-Green Bay game is going to be a bit of a shootout, so you can go with Dak. And then Aaron Rodgers. No one's going to be on him this week. He has dominated the Cowboys over the course of his career. Running back gets very interesting, Fancy. I think if I'm making a cash game lineup, I want Zeke and I want Christian McCaffrey this week, and I'm probably sitting Kamara and Dalvin Cook. What about you?
What about David Johnson, though?
Love him this week as well.
This is the spot for David Johnson. And I know for the last few years with David Johnson, the injuries, he's back. What is this guy's role exactly? This is the spot. I need some exposure in this Arizona-Cincinnati game even from both sides, as nauseous as that has me say right there.
I will say that if you play David Johnson this week, you're going to get him at lower ownership because people are going to lock in Christian McCaffrey. They're going to likely lock in Alvin Kamara and Zeke Elliott, maybe Dalvin Cook as well. People are going to see what Nick Chubb did last week, and if they're playing Thursday through Monday, which you can still get in on, by the way, over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. You just don't have access to the Thursday players. There's going to be some really intriguing names. We mentioned Austin Eckler, David Montgomery certainly in play as well. And don't forget about James White. Those numbers really skyrocket, averaging almost 22 fantasy points per game when Rex Burkhead is not in the lineup. Wide receiver spot, I think this will be a little bit more chalk-friendly. Julio going to be locked in. DeAndre Hopkins going to be locked in. And then Michael Thomas seems like another great play. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been terrific against the run, but have really struggled against the pass. And despite the move from Drew Brees to Teddy Bridgewater, Fensty, Michael Thomas's stats really haven't been implicated all that much.
No, he's still getting targets as well. And other guys that we mentioned T.Y. Hilton. I think because of how he's banged up, lower ownership there as well, Ben. Really like him in this game versus Chiefs.
The other guy that I think you could really feel good about this week, Tyler Boyd. If you're wanting exposure from that Cincinnati-Arizona game, we talked about Tyler Eifert in the matchup for them. Auden Tate is going to be probably the most chalky player on the salary sites this week. I think you can get some leverage there and go with Tyler Boyd.
I like that too. Again, we want to try to be different, and everyone's favorite story this week when it comes to Cincy is not only Tyler Eifert, but also Auden Tate as well. Like you said, Ben, a lot of people are going to be on him. Wish it was more of a secret. It's not.
All right, before we wrap things up, favorite cash tight end plays. Always Travis Kelce involved, and I think a lot of people are going to love him either in the tight end or the flex spot, knowing that they have the hammer in the Sunday night game. But certainly Zach Ertz, George Kittle, if you're playing Thursday through Monday, are involved as well. And I'm not shying away from Darren Waller this week, even against the Bears, because Derek Carr is going to have to get the ball out super quick. It is a revenge game for Khalil Mack. So that means Derek Carr, 3 steps, get the ball out. Who's he been targeting more than anybody else in the NFL? Darren Waller at the tight end spot. So I think he could see upwards of 15 targets today. May only get like 70 yards, but 15 catches PPR setting. Darren Waller once again in play.
Absolutely, and with Tyrell Williams hurt, that's going to help him with the target share as well. But also, let's not forget something we talked about earlier in the show. Jimmy Graham in a good spot as well.
Yes, very much so.
Be going in on salaried and non-salaried sites too.
Yeah,
trying to be different.
Jimmy Graham in play, Evan Ingram in play, Austin Hooper, Mark Andrews, all those guys we talked about today as well. So there you go. It's another edition of Fantasy Football Sunday presented by FantasySportsMarkets.com. Thanks to all of you guys for sending in your questions. We hope we were able to get to all of them. If not, you can always hit us up on Twitter, at Benny Heiss, at Fensty Sports, and at FSM Contest. Fensty, before we head out, where can the good people find your work over the course of this week?
At Fensty Sports on Twitter for all of your help. And again, you could always catch me on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio every single Saturday, 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern. We'll actually be hosting Monday and Tuesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on our Drive Time show, and always fantasyalarm.com. Basketball season's coming up. Also do a lot of work in that regard.
We'll have to get you back on the FSM podcast to do a little NBA preview as well. There's nobody
Okay,
more locked
great.
in. Nobody more locked in when it comes to the NBA than our guy Fensty. So thank you guys.
Great time to be a sports guy.
Great time. So for Fensty, I'm Ben. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for participating. We will be back next week, 10:30 a.m. East Coast time, 9:30 a.m. Central time for Fantasy Football Sunday presented by Fantasy Sports Markets. Be good, everybody.
Dominate.